Almost 3 years ago, I got addicted to productivity. I tried every hack I could find. And I followed the advice of Ali Abdal, Andrew Huberman, Iman Gaji, James Clear. And you know what? It worked. In fact, it worked too well. And I managed to get to school, work on the side, hit the gym, start kickboxing. I built a business from scratch when I was 23. Honestly, I just wouldn't recommend this productivity path to anyone. Pressure of the results came with crippling anxiety, which led me to a burnout so bad I thought my body was giving up on me. And then I realized it was all a lie. Being productive didn't make my life any better. In fact, it made me miserable. And the only thing that saved me was to learn how to do nothing. Everyone out there is telling you that you need to be productive. You need to become financially free. You need to optimize your life. You need to biohack your system. You need to go to the gym, work on the side. You need to have a side hustle. You need to have a relationship. And when you're a young man, the message that I acquired, at least, was that if I'm not exceptional, then I'm going to be invisible. In this society where everyone is talking about themselves all the time on social media, exposing their lives and everything, my biggest fear was to being average, was to go unnoticed and to leave no mark on my environment. And that's what led me to become productive in the first place. So I was 22 and I felt like I had everything to prove, which is true in a sense. But that doesn't mean that you have to waste your life being a machine of productivity. You go down the slope when you start believing that your value, your personal value as an individual is the sum of your achievements and whatever you can put on your resume. And so with productivity, I made progress. So I started achieving things that people around me weren't achieving, and I started feeling good about it because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Society told me that that's what I should do. So I followed it. The thing with that is that it creates a mindset of constant pressure that you put onto yourself because you know that you have high expectations on you and you have to put in the work to get those outcomes right. And so there's a countdown in my head. At least at the time, that's what I thought. I had those deadlines. I had those massive goals and I had very little time to achieve it. And that's at that moment, anxiety became my fuel instead of, interest, curiosity, and passion. So my life became only productivity. When I'm saying only productivity, I'm saying I tracked everything. My habits, my sleep, my workouts, my diet, started journaling, started meditating, started doing everything, cold showers, you name it. I had way too many goals. I had way too many deadlines. The thing is that my information came from mostly YouTube and books and podcasts that I was reading or watching. You become so overwhelmed with the amount of information that you have to digest that you literally cannot use the information. And so there becomes a point where so much resources my way that I couldn't make sense of any of it anymore. And if a YouTuber said something, I made it rule. I had to start the next morning. I had to follow it for 30 days, whatever it is. And that's how I became, you could say, almost delusional. I wanted to become a millionaire by the time I was 25. I thought I needed to move to Dubai because there was no tax system. I had to be in this perfect relationship, but I didn't have any time during my day because I was scheduling everything. Nothing made sense, honestly. I looked what you could call successful at my age from the outside because I was in a good shape. I was productive, had different jobs, and I could make money on the side with those things I built. But inside, I felt completely drained, completely lost, no direction. And on top of that, this anxiety that was looping over and over in my mind. And there's kind of a switch that you flip at some point when you're at the edge of what you're humanly capable of doing. You start seeing rest as a failure. When you feel like there's something wrong with not doing anything productive. And that's what I felt. I felt like every time I was to stop, to try to relax, to try to do something else, my mind was telling me, you need to do something, you need to be productive. Look at the time that you have. You could use that time to make money. And so I felt this immense guilt whenever I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. This completely rewires your nervous system. And that's dangerous because it means that you overdrive yourself to a point. you feel it's normal. And that's just not normal, not okay. And you need to know, if you're trying to be as productive as possible at the moment, that this could lead you to at least illness, but maybe even die prematurely, because you're going to flood your system with these stress hormones, which have become your fuel since you're productive all the time and under those harsh constraints. I didn't realize it at the time, but with perspective now, I realized that it was about control. That's what I lacked most. I was working all the time because I was trying to channel that anxiety of not being able to exert enough control over my environment in my life. And so productivity was in fact not a way to reach my goals, but a coping mechanism. So it's not self-improvement anymore. We're not talking about productivity. We're talking about just doing to forget that you're anxious in the first place and that you don't know where your life is going to lead to. And that's when it becomes workaholism. And people have different ways of describing it, but it's a societal problem. And we assume, at least I did, that being productive is good and that I'm on the right path, whereas you're inevitably going to burn out if you continue acting and living like this. So that's what happened. I was living at that very fast pace. My days were the same over and over again, and that was guaranteeing me a burnout, which happened sooner than later because my body and mind couldn't sustain this constant intensity anymore and this constant pressure, permanent pressure. When stress becomes your main source of energy, when you're living on stress, on caffeine, on no sleep, on the edge all the time, then it becomes an addiction, but you're burning out your system. You only have so few resources that you can't act like this. Otherwise, you're just gonna go to the ground. And so I was on little sleep. I was on caffeine pills because I don't like coffee, and caffeine pills were way more powerful than coffee. And I was thinking nonstop. My brain was on fire all the time. I got sick a couple times and it was bad, and it got worse every time I got sick. My immune system was completely wrecked because of inflammation, because the more you're stressed, the more inflammation is triggered within the body. And one day it was so bad I couldn't get out of bed. There was this episode where I couldn't do anything. I felt like my body was dying. I thought I would die. And so it took me weeks, it took me months to recover from this episode. And that's when I realized that maybe productivity had become a poison for me. Maybe I overdosed on productivity, but no one had told me that this was possible, that you could take productivity, this good thing that we think is going to help us with, the money, the relationship and everything. No one had told me that this could lead to, being sick or almost feeling like you're gonna die. Because the truth is that we're not machines. We can't act like we have a limited amount of energy. Also, your worth doesn't come from what you produce. You're not an industry. You're a human being with an emotional system that is not being respected when you only think about productivity. And that's when I researched about this, and I found the idea that doing nothing was the right solution. And so if we go back in time, we're going to find this idea in Taoism and the Zen community that doing less equals achieving more. And Lao Tzu said that by doing nothing, everything is done. Because the brain clears and becomes insightful when it's not doing, when it's not engaged in the action right now. In psychology, we link that this ancient idea to something that's neuroscientifically true, which is the default mode network, which is a network of different brain areas that activate whenever you're just living your life. So basically not focused on to write one thing. It activates when you rest, when you're not engaged into something that demands active focus. And during that time, you integrate emotions, you solve problems, you fuel creativity. Whenever you're trying to be as productive as possible, you're not allowing your brain to process all of this in the background. And by preventing this from happening, you're completely misguiding your brain and the different functions it's been built to do. And so slowly I started integrating in my own life that doing less could lead me to achieve more, and that doing less could be a good thing because I'm not supposed to be doing all the time. There's a really important notion, and then we're going to talk about practical habits that I put in place, but there's this important notion in biology which is called homeostasis. And it's the tendency of all creatures to try and, as much as possible, maintain a stable internal environment. The problem with this model is that it's a continuum. And when you pull it to one side, then it triggers the other side to try and get back to equilibrium, which is the point in the middle. But what you can do as a human being is that you can shift the extremities onto the continuum. In our case, we have boredom and stimulation. This is the continuum that we're on when we're talking about productivity and overdriving your system. And so this is the normal continuum. And when you get used to being productive all the time, what you do is you cut out the portion which is for boredom, which is used for maintaining the equilibrium. And so you're only living in this part of the spectrum, which is about stimulation. So you completely forget about boredom. It becomes super alienating and super unnatural to be bored. To counter this highly activated, stimulated state all the time, the only balance to do that is going to be boredom. You're going to have to be bored after being highly stimulated to go back to the middle. And when I understood that concept, I was like, this makes first a lot of sense. And second, this is why as humans, we have been engaging in activities for millennia that are not so productive. Things like walking, things like reading, things that are more passive and not doing all the time. And so when it comes to being practical, I separated those in 3 different categories. The first one is rest. The second one is relaxation. And the third one is meditation. Now, the one that you have to respect the most, the one that's needed because it's a basic function of a human being, is to rest. You need to prioritize your sleep. I used to use my sleep as something that could fit my day. I would make my day and then try and fit my sleep schedule into it. But the problem is that you have to do the opposite. You have to have a completely fixed and, as much as possible, stable sleep schedule. And then you build your day around that schedule, because sleep is way more important than whatever you can do during the day. The second thing I did was to implement naps whenever I needed. Those are mental naps. Some people call it power naps because they last, for me, 12 minutes. And this is for me a system reset. So what I do is when I start crashing during the afternoon, I take a break, I kind of lie down, and then I close my eyes, focus on my breathing, and I drift to sleep within a couple of minutes. Then my alarm wakes me up and I feel like my whole system has reset and it feels great. Second thing is important to talk about is relaxation. So you need to start with one, but then you can add on top of that other ones when you're comfortable with the first one. You need to choose low stimulation activities. So for me, it was reading. It was watching calm TV shows and slow walks. I think that walking is especially powerful because it's going to be kind of in the middle. You're still activating your system because, well, you're active, you're walking, you're moving, but at the same time, your brain is kind of relaxed and you can reorganize your thoughts. You can think about something, you can clear your head. But find what relaxes you most. Find what works for you. Find what's most accessible, not what's trendy. My advice, if you don't know where to start, is to start with walking because it's physical and it's good for you and it's going to really help you with all the other stuff I talked about in this video. And the last thing is meditation, or should I say stillness, because the important stuff is not that you meditate like a monk for 4 hours, but more that you stay still and that you focused onto one specific thing, one anchor, they call it in meditation practices. And meditation is also a direct way to connect with boredom, because when you close your eyes, you don't have any stimulation, then you're going to be bored and your mind's going to try and make up for that lack of stimulation. It can be a guided meditation protocol, or it can be just sitting alone, sitting down and thinking about your life for 5 minutes. The goal is just to be alone, no distraction, nothing, one focus, and then just try and laser onto it. Because the only goal really is to improve awareness on your mental space and your mental environment, and it's going to help you a lot. So the big problem is that we have become overly focused on productivity. We have thrown relaxation and rest out of the window because those things don't make money, and we're entirely based on efficiency right now. But on a personal level, you have to redefine what productivity is to you, because if it's swallowing everything else, then it's not worth it. And again, you have to know that if you're like me and you have a similar experience, sitting on your own 2 hands would be the single most difficult thing you have to do, but it's the only way to get back to a stable mental environment. Anyway, I hope this helps. In the meantime, just trust the process.